Good morning, friends. Today we're going to talk about the Archaic people. These are people that were found in Colorado from about the year 5000 up until about 0 BC. So this brings us up into the AD times. And these people followed the Paleo Indians in time, and they did things better, you could say, than the Paleo Indians. So we're going to talk about that. Basically, their way of life changed. And here are some of the things that were different. So they had newer and better spearheads. Their spearheads were smaller and pointier, and they had notches on the sides that helped them stay on to the sticks that they were connected to. So it was easier for the hunters to use them. The second thing that was different is that they used tools in a different way. So the Paleo Indians had to be really close to the animals they were hunting, and they would use their hands to kind of hold the spear and drive it into the animal. Kind of like in the picture here, the guy that's standing. But the Archaic people, first of all, were hunting smaller animals. So they weren't hunting mammoth anymore. Mammoth were starting to die out. So they were hunting things like deer and elk and animals even smaller than that. And they started using their spears in a different way. So they used this thing called an atlatl. It's over here. You can kind of see it, atlatl. And basically what that did is you put your spear in the notch of it, and then you use the atlatl to throw your spear. So they were hunting from further away to capture and kill their prey. So I think of like an atlatl, like if you have a dog and you have one of those ball holder things that holds the ball, and then you hold the stick and you whip the ball out. That's kind of like what an atlatl was, except the atlatl didn't hold a ball, it held your spear, and it gave it more force, and it could throw your spear further than you could with just your arm. Another thing that changed in their way of life is their diet. So they weren't only eating meat now, they were eating smaller animals, so meat wasn't it's not that it wasn't as available. They weren't eating as much of it. And they were gathering more. So they became hunters and gatherers, not just hunters. They were eating vegetation like seeds and roots and other plants. And then this is a picture of a grinding stone that has been found. Basically, they were taking some of these plants and making flour, and then they could kind of form little cakes out of the flour and cook those over the heat. So that was a different way of life as well. And then the last thing that changed, and this kind of shows this in the background here, is that they had more permanent homes. And we kind of know what those homes look like because in the 1980s, so when I was a kid, they found an old hut that dated from this time period. It's 4,000 years old. So that would be from like 2000 BC. And they found this hut that was basically made of twigs and poles and then covered with mud. And what had happened is the hut had burned down at some point. And because they had used a mud that had a lot of clay in it, the clay basically got fired, just like you would do in a kiln. And it showed the imprints of the poles. So archaeologists know what those huts looked like. People at this time also would find rock ledges and kind of build homes under the rock ledges in these kind of like scooped out, hollowed out caves. But either way, they would stay in place. They didn't move as much. So that's just a little bit about the Archaic people. Today, you're going to take your packet, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to update your timeline. So at around 7,000 BC, and I'm writing this down too, we start to see what we call the Archaic people. Okay, so this predates Native Americans. So here's my Paleo Indians. I'm going to put my Archaic people about halfway on the line here and make sure that you're labeling it with 7,000 BC. Now they were here 5,000 BC. 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BC. Now they were here longer than then, so they stayed all the way up until year 0, okay? The second thing that we need to do is we're going to take some notes about the Archaic period. So the first note that I have that I've written in here is that they were found in Colorado around 5,000 to 0 BC. That's when they would have seen them here. And that they changed their ways of life from the Paleo Indians. So they had a different way of life. One of those things is they had smaller spear points. These were sharper and smaller. They had different tools. So I put the example here of an atlatl. That's the thing that helped them throw those spears further. They hunted smaller animals. So they weren't going after mammoths anymore. And they gathered roots and seeds. So their diet was a little bit different. And the last thing is that they had more permanent homes. So you might want to freeze your screen on these notes. Make sure that you get them into your workbook. And then that way you can post your picture of both your timeline and your workbook so that they're updated. You don't want to type these into Seesaw because then you won't have the accumulation of notes as we move forward. Okay? All right. Good luck, and we'll talk soon.